Well, thank you very much for the invitation to share our experiences of monitoring and evaluating climate change adaptation programs. But first I'd like to introduce ourselves. I am Joanne Chong and this is Gero, and we are researchers at the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney. So at the Institute, there are over 80 of us researchers and postgraduate students, and we conduct research on projects addressing a range of sustainability issues around the globe. So at the forefront of our thinking on every project is impact, and very much the difference we can make for people and communities towards sustainable development. And in our program on aid effectiveness in particular, one area of interest is exploring and designing new and effective ways of conducting monitoring and evaluation of climate change adaptation initiatives in ways that actually deal with the multi-layered complexity of such projects.
So today we'll be sharing the framework of our local level indicators from a major child-centred, community-based climate change adaptation project in the Philippines. It was implemented by Plan International and Save the Children from 2012 to 2016. And it's more than just a set of indicators. What was key to the project was that we produced a guidance document for practitioners to use in real time and to use the indicators to reflect on and monitor the implementation over the course of the program.
But before we go on, I'd just like to say that the involvement of the Institute and the University of Technology Sydney in the project was only made possible by the vision and the dedication of Plan International and Save the Children to really foster on the project learning for their team and to their openness to us as researchers on the project. So I'd like to hand over now to Pia Triechel, Program Manager Climate Change Adaptation from Plan International Australia, to tell you a little bit more about the project.
Hi there, I'm Pia Triechel, the Senior Advisor for Climate Change here at Plan International Australia. Plan International is a global child rights organisation that operates in more than 51 countries to provide children with access to basic rights like food, clean water, protection, health and a good standard of living. The child-centred community-based adaptation project in the Philippines began in 2012 with funding from Australian Aid, who is now the Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade. The program aimed to build the adaptive capacity of children and their communities in the Philippines to manage the impacts of climate change. And the project had two specific objectives. The first was increasing the resilience of children, youth and their communities to the impacts of climate change across 40 barangays in the Philippines, and they were specifically in Aurora, Northern Samar, Eastern Samar and Southern Leyte. The second was strengthening the evidence base within the Philippines for child-centred community-based adaptation to inform policy and practice. The project was implemented through a partnership between Plan International, Save the Children and the Institute for Sustainable Futures, or ISF. And the relationship with ISF in particular was focused on utilising the experiences of the project to develop some thinking about how we can measure the success of climate change adaptation projects, particularly those that involve children.
Our indicator framework and the indicators themselves are heavily informed by the experiences of children and their communities through a participatory process and very much based on the evidence base of the project. The indicators centre around three main areas. The first is knowledge about climate change. So children's understanding of climate change science, its impacts, so children understanding the impacts of climate change on their families and their schools and their communities, and also adaptation measures. So children's ability to identify adaptation measures that are relevant to their families, schools and communities. The second area of the indicator framework is advocacy. So advocacy by children about climate change, their communication to their families and schools about vulnerabilities and hazards and adaptation options, and also the receptiveness of families and their schools and others in their community to those children's voices on climate change adaptation. The third part of the indicator framework is around policy and practice. So the influence of children on climate change adaptation practice and policy, the influence of children's perspectives on climate change adaptation practices undertaken by themselves and their families and their communities, but also the influence of children on climate change adaptation practice and policy through local government, so municipal, provincial and barangay village leaders. So we found this to be a really useful set of indicators for any project with a theory of change around knowledge and capacity building. And the indicators were developed and tested through an iterative process. We tested them and collected data against them, and then we made changes and tested them again. So this process ensured that they made sense to those various audiences. It also ensured that the process of data collection was linked to the monitoring and evaluation of the project as a whole. So the theory of change for this project centred around the same three areas that our indicator framework was based: knowledge, advocacy, and policy and practice.
So now our aim was not only to develop the indicators, but also very much to develop a field-tested process and system for the program implementers to collect information and data against these indicators, and importantly take a participatory approach for doing so. So this process of reflection and exchange is another really transferable part of what we did. So a different initiative might end up with a different set of local level indicators, depending on their program objectives or theory of change. But we also developed a systematic process for the team to progressively understand how the children were responding to the project activities and how the project was helping to build their resilience. So we've developed a guidebook that outlines this process, and it includes question guides and other instructions for facilitators, and there is more detail in that document. But in summary, there were three components. Firstly, the team conducted focus groups with children, taking very much a strengths-based approach, which allows space for the children and the team members to together reflect on the activities to date. Secondly, we interviewed adult participants, including from the school, so school teachers, community members, parents, and the municipal government, to firstly hear their perspectives on the program activities and the project activities, but also to very much acknowledge their role as duty bearers. Thirdly, during the systematic debrief sessions, so these were sessions at the end of each day or end of every couple of days, so this is after focus groups and after interviews were conducted, the team got together and systematically brought together information from different sources and started to analyse it and reflect on what it might mean for program implementation in real time. And so finally, just a note on that in terms of analysis. In monitoring and evaluation, one of the common practices is for external researchers or external consultants to not only collect information, but to do the analysis off-site and offline in a very separate way. But in this case, we very much didn't want to treat the analysis as a separate exercise. So we also developed a process, which is also in the guidebook, for team members themselves to analyse and revisit the data and the information and hear and reflect on the voices from the children.
So I'll just share some voices from the field, and these come from our testing of the indicators and linked to the indicator framework. So still around those three areas of knowledge, advocacy, and policy and practice. So the first one around knowledge of climate change, and these come from elementary school children. One noted, in school, climate change disrupts our classes because of too much heat. Children are no longer attentive in class. Another noted, fishermen and farmers are also affected by climate change. They are experiencing food shortages. Under advocacy, we have an example from another elementary school child who noted, we are given a chance to share what we have learned about climate change and on how we can adapt to its effects through radio broadcasting. Another child noted, we were able to share to our younger schoolmates what we learned from the seminars around climate change. And for policy and practice, there was an interesting example from a municipal councillor, and she noted, these children are fully aware of the situation of our Mother Earth. As a policy and lawmaker of this municipality, I will ensure to include these children in laws and ordinances that I pass because they are the future who will benefit from it.
When I think about what was useful in the process, one of the things that first springs to mind is about the way the research was truly based in a partnership approach. Jo and Anna visited the communities in question multiple times throughout the development of the framework and worked with the project team to ensure that the outputs were firmly based in the project's actual experiences. This meant that the project was able to learn from the research during the actual life of the project, rather than having to wait until the project's conclusion, which is the usual case. At the same time, ISF, the researchers, were right there learning from the project and the community's experiences, so were able to adjust their thinking throughout the process of the project based in real time. One of the biggest lessons for a cross-organisational project like this, particularly one with funding from Australia but then implemented in the Philippines, is that the practicalities of time differences and scheduling conflicts mean that flexibility is key, and investing the time to develop genuine relationships is critical. The indicators developed through this project have been incorporated into evaluations and M&E processes throughout Plan's other child-centred climate change adaptation projects across the Asia-Pacific region. The work we developed together with ISF under this project, based in the Philippines, continues to inform our work today and our thinking about how best to direct our efforts to help children and their communities to adapt to the impacts of climate change, both now and in the future.
So the indicative framework has actually been used in two other instances. One was a midterm evaluation of a project in Myanmar, and the other was the final evaluation of DFAT's program in the Philippines of this child-centred community-based adaptation project. We also have a couple of other outputs from the project as well as the guidance document. We have a journal article, a book chapter, and also a case study describing the partnership between the NGOs and our institute. So we'd like to thank you for allowing us to present our work today, and please do get in touch if you have any further questions. Thank you very much.